And I'd like to give a warm welcome to Hilda Orton, Chair of the Scientific Board. Hilda?
Thank you very much, Jared, for this. And welcome to everyone. It's great to see you, everybody here on board to this meeting. We have many presentations here today. And first is a reporting session where I will give a little background for what the Scientific Board has been doing in the past year. And John Johnson and Steve McEachen will present the strategic plan for the coming years. Darren will present the scientific work plan for the Scientific Board, and then TC highlights. And after that, working groups will bring in their input. After that, we will have some new products and discussion topics up and running. The website, DDI, CDI, and qualitative data subgroup, DDI Lifecycle 4.0, and then an open floor for questions and discussions after that. So now I will start my presentation. So do you see presentation mode now, or do you see
That's in speaker mode, Hilda. It's in speaker mode.
It's in speaker mode.
That's what I'm
So,
saying. Yeah. So.
Voila.
Better.
So,
good.
Okay. So here is the members of the Scientific Board. Darren and I are chairs. You see the members here and also the past members. We have Flavio, Ingo, Simon, Wolfgang as members with voting rights, and Jared and Wendy as ex officio members. And the activities in the past year, we are doing virtual SP meetings monthly. Sometimes meetings are needed in between, and then we do it. We also have executive board and the scientific board coordination course led by Jared, and together with John and Steve. We had a physical scientific board meeting in Bergen in October last year. And we also had an event in connection with Eddie, with Jared, the EB, and us together. And on the proceedings and workflows in our old plan, it is about something about working groups. We have now 2 new working groups since last year. That is the RDF equivalence working group, who Dan Smith will talk about later on, and also the questions and questionnaires working group that Roma will talk about. And we have one group that is not existing anymore, and that is the Para data working group. Otherwise, you can see here all the other great groups that are doing all of the work for us. And we have been working on the scientific work plan. Darren, most of all, have been doing it, but the whole scientific board also. And that is now structured in terms of the 3 strategic priorities of the strategic plan. John will talk later about the strategic plan, and Darren about the scientific work plan. So you will know more about that after. The new scientific work plan is more goal-oriented, and we try to separate between continuous and time-specific tasks, and it will be implemented by us, the TC, and the working groups. So here is just shortly about how we went about the goals of the former work plan. Basically, we found that some of the tasks in that plan were really TC tasks, or there were really tasks who had been continuing all over. They are not in a specific period, but more always. What has been done here really is on SP2 is that we have a contact person for each of the working groups and working group reporting. And for SP3, that is about creating a software developers group. That was done in 2023. Most of these other topics will be continued in the new scientific work plan. And for SB7, we also did something about liaisons, and we appointed Arif and Gregory as a UNEC Stats Community Liaison. This is an informal liaison for the scientific board focusing on practical tasks. And there will also be a new temporary working group under the scientific board about DDI ISO certification, and that group will explore benefits and so on for DDI to become an ISO standard. And that group is to be approved soon, and Gilman has agreed to be the chair of that group. Then upcoming activities, we will have a physical meeting in Kur in December in connection with ADDI, and the main task will be to follow up on the task from the scientific work plan, the quarterly working group reporting, and contact between the scientific board and our working group. And we are thinking about our meeting structure that each time we will have focus on one of the strategic priority topics from the strategic plan. So that is basically that from me. And I leave now the floor to John to talk about the strategic plan. And I will share the slides for you, John.
Okay.
Voilà.
Thank you. I'm just going to do a quick run through this. We'll do something a bit more in depth at the annual meeting in a month's time. But I thought it was worth just picking up on just because it does lead into the scientific plan. So the executive board wanted to have a strategic plan that was a bit more focused than the previous one. So the previous one was a little less focused than what we've done this time round. And really it's about, I think the underlying things is around trying to identify what the priorities are, and you know, some of the details will be worked out in reaction to how things go, and also obviously a lot of the things are in the strategic plan are being executed by, you know, for instance, by the scientific board and scientific community. So it's not really up to the EB to decide what those things are, just to provide the framework in which those things exist. So we've yeah, so do you want to bring up the next slide as possible? Yeah. So I'm about to say these documents are linked, I think, from the agenda. The actual plan itself is just a summary of it. So the three priorities, one of the three priorities is engaging the community. You know, the community, you know, is very vibrant already. You know, we have successful conferences and so on, but we want to, you know, really make sure that the that we reach out to the community in a way that is appropriate to them. So that's the first thing, which we're not always sure we're doing. And the other thing is around particularly, you know, renewing an active and engaged membership at the institutional level. We've had some drop off of membership recently, and obviously that's where the revenue comes to do a lot of the activities. So we're quite focused over the next period on ensuring that we retain and extend the membership, and also, you know, make sure that membership is secured rather than be fragile around one individual person, which has been a bit of a historic problem. Bring up the slides. And then obviously, you know, more members is good, but actually, you know, in reality, the people who take part in the community are the people who are the advocates for the standards. And so, you know, understanding what the needs of the users are, making sure that we reflect the needs of those users, and all users, not just the most valuable, is an important part of that process. And Now, we think it's important that there is some of that training material is audience specific, so that you understand the use of the standards and the products in the context of the community that you work within, or the discipline you work within. And I think that's something we would like to see happen. And as part of that is to build relationships with other standards. The Alliance as a organisation and the standards, are remarkable things. And we can learn, others can learn from us, and as much as we can learn from them. And I think building out the Alliance's place in the sort of data landscape or metadata landscape is a really critical part of sustaining the Alliance as a long-standing organisation. Next slide, please. And the Alliance has had significant growth in the products over the last few years. We've brought new products on in the last 2 or 3 years. And that's, as well as the older products, making sure that all the products do align in the way that's appropriate for alignment. That doesn't mean you'll be able to move stuff from code book to one other thing or whatever necessarily, in a very straightforward manner, but at least you have to understand how you could do that and what the common things are between the standards. So, are they trying to describe the same thing, albeit in a necessarily slightly different way because of the context of the standards? And as part of that, improving documentation so that people understand the appropriate use of the different products we have. And that's also much more of a challenge now that we've got more products than we've had in the past. And it's been great to see the rebirth of the developer group. And they've already had 2 hackathons and several very large online meetings. That's a really, really fantastic development. And we want to ensure that enthusiasm is kept up, and we support their activities, and also obviously the activities of others who are producing tools and resources that aren't necessarily in the group but elsewhere. We want to find ways to support the sustainability of an ecosystem around the standard software.
Yeah, 1 minute.
The last slide, please. And then in terms of delivery, so one thing that's been missing for a long time, well, recently, has been a marketing group. And the EB is going to have to step into place to at least get that started and get that moving on. And the way we're proposing is to have a series of campaigns over the 3 years aimed at specific user groups, which align with the objectives. So better understanding the user group. So one suggestion I think we're probably going to be carrying forward is to start with the statistical agencies, to better understand what the needs of the agency are in relation to DDI, to do some work on identifying potential new member organisations. That's in conjunction with our existing membership, but obviously to identify where we should put some effort in terms of trying to approach and recruit statistical agencies and similar organisations. Whether there's a need to develop, we need to develop some materials around that to target those audiences, and we'll work with the working groups to make sure that's done. And try to hold events where the products and involvement in DDI and resources can be showcased to try to obviously increase the presence of the Alliance virtually, and obviously hopefully at some physical events where it makes sense. So any questions? That'd be good. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. So if there is one quick question, otherwise we will do that later at the end of the meeting. So now, Darren, will you talk through the scientific work plan? Can you
Yeah,
see
sure.
the plan on the screen now?
Yeah, okay. So everyone, I've put a link on the chat to the scientific work plan. I didn't see a lot of point in writing slides about another document. So I'll, and obviously you can read this for yourself as well, but I'll talk through a few bits of the rationale behind this and some of the things we've tried to do with this work plan as opposed to the previous work plan. Now, I mean, this is a synthesis of a number of differing viewpoints throughout the community, different perspectives. The DDI Alliance is a broad church, as the cliche goes, and what we've tried to do here is strike a careful balance between some of the kind of newer developments, cross-domain developments in CDI, while making sure that we continue to serve our core audience and reflect some of the new and exciting developments that are happening in Lifecycle and Codebook as well. So this scientific work plan emerges from lots of conversations, the scientific board meeting in Bergen that we had in October, lots of water cooler conversations. So although it's a relatively small tabulated document, it actually does reflect a lot of input from different quarters. Now, we're very grateful to the executive board for providing that framework within the strategic document and giving us essentially those three pillars, if you like, of alignment, expansion, engagement, because that gives us a set of coat pegs to hang some more specific goals. Now, within the kind of pyramid of artifacts in the DDI Alliance, at the top we have the executive board producing a set of strategic pillars which set the tone and direction and the direction of travel for the DDI Alliance. The scientific board work plan sits in between the executive board and the individual working group implementation plans. We wanted to be careful not to be over prescriptive in the sense of having very granular objectives and saying to working groups, this is what you must do by such and such a month in such and such a year. And we've called these goals. Now, I don't want to split semantic hairs about the difference between goals, objectives, outcomes, and aims. So it's probably the least worst word I could use rather than the perfect word. But what we've tried to do is have a number of items within which the working groups can align their individual granular working plans and which we can review as a scientific board at our scientific board meetings and say, are we making progress towards this? How is this operating? I mean, to me, the main function of the scientific board is to enable the working groups to successfully implement their working plans and to make sure that we are, a liaison between the main strategy from the executive board and the working groups. Okay, so can you scroll down, Hilda, to the first set? Okay, so we structured this very deliberately to align with the executive board's kind of three pillars, if you like. So within the first one, with engagement, it's a very, very clear aspiration now that the product suite within DDI is maturing, expanding to provide, better integration and better alignment there. Now, what's particularly important is that users in this expanding kind of set of products are able to navigate their way through the different products, identify clearly what those products are for. So part of that is product marketing, part of that is integration and alignment. But really what we're trying to do here is identify ways in which users can more easily work their way through, should I use Codebook? Should I use Lifecycle, CDI, XCOS, SDTL? So some of this implies, as I'll talk about later, an improvements to the website. Some of it implies improvements to how we signpost things in our documentation. So when I talk about signposting, a couple of people haven't been clear. I'm really talking about the user journey from first rocking up to the DDI Alliance's resources and knowing where to go. Okay, so the second one, we've talked about audience mapping and how we engage with audiences better. In order to do that, we need some good audience lists of stakeholders and categories, sectors. As my colleague Hervé would say, this just comes down to having some big lists, reference points that we can go to. So the EB will obviously be doing kind of market research as well, but developing information that as a resource is going to be useful for that as well. I think W3C, deepening connections with them and exploring how DDI components could be made more visible, whether that's as a W3C recommendation or ultimately even a W3 standard. Those things are slightly open-ended at the moment, but we do want to make it explicitly clear that we do want to deepen those connections with W3C. And 1.4 is really about looking for opportunities for tools development. The developers group is doing some great work, but it's become a cliche now almost. The standard will have much more uptake the more tools we can build. So the DDI developers group is a catalyst for that, but how do we engage with wider developer communities as well to increase the number of tools that are available for DDI? You scroll down, Hilda. Okay, and then we have expansion, which is about how do we increase the uptake of DDI? How do we embed ourselves more deeply into different communities that we may not necessarily be embedded in at the moment? So there's a couple of more specific things here. The DDI Alliance registry is a criminally underused resource at the moment for URN resolution. So there's a set of activities here implied by this to make people more aware of the DDI registry and how it can be used. The second one is about increasing the number of examples of DDI. I can speak from personal experience. When I was first using DDI, I would have appreciated, lots and lots more examples. Who does that? Who generates that? Who checks it? Who QAs it? But it's important to have these available. We do have some markup examples. Some of them are a little stale by now. How do we actually get this across the line? How do we increase the number of examples? So 2.3 is about engaging with the cross-domain entities and initiatives that are out there. I'm not talking purely about DDI CDI here, by the way. This applies to any DDI Alliance product. 2.4, this has emerged recently about having specific connections and engagement with the SDMX community in UNECE. 2.5 is this is more of a geographically based thing. It's not news to say that we're very kind of North America, Australia and Europe centric at the moment. How do we actually engage with South American repositories or communities or statistical agencies? How do we do that for Africa or Asia, for that matter? So, it's really about progressing this rather than saying we're going to engage specifically with this specific repository in a specific African country. So 2.7 again is about upping the level of guidance that we have for software architects and developers. There's nothing particularly radical here. It's just a commitment to say we will provide, increased levels of documentation to help people get over the initial barrier for entry or perceived barrier to enter into DDI. So 2.8 is about looking for additional funding opportunities as well. Obviously, we have memberships, but how can we identify additional funding opportunities, whether that potentially could be through Horizon Europe, for example. So yeah, it's just about broadening the scope of that. Hilda, can you scroll down to the last one? Thanks.
Yeah, basically 1 minute left.
Yeah, okay. So in terms of alignment, as I say, in a way, and I don't want to give Collectica any more business than they've already got, but they do a really good job of marketing their suite of products as an integrated suite. And I think the DDI Alliance can learn something from that in terms of what the relationships between Lifecycle, CDI and Codebook. How do we market this, do the product marketing as a large ecosystem of products? So within 3.1, TC are already doing a lot of good work on this already in terms of integrating the technical documentation, in terms of looking forward to the website and training, how do we develop a formal information architecture and content management strategy, you'll notice that some of these are really reflective of where we are as an organization in terms of our maturity. The DDI Alliance is running for over 20 years now, so we're starting things here. How do we start to construct some of these big lists, and structuring the way we do things a little bit more. An integrated training platform, media library. This would be an extension to the website where we have a kind of more structured media platform. Liaise with the executive board to develop a more formal communication strategy. This is bound up with current initiatives around marketing, and I'm running out of time, but improving collaboration between the scientific board and working groups. Some people have taken fright at more formal periodic reporting. All that means really just standardizing the reporting, in a practical way, just using templates, for example, and supporting the technical committee as they do more consolidation in the infrastructure. RDF serializations are something that most of us know about already, but the scientific board really needs to sponsor and foster those activities as we go forward, and support development and release of new products, of which we'd be talking about CDI 1.0 potentially in the autumn, DDI 4.0 life cycle, and Codebook 2.6 and potentially 2.7. So I hope this is relatively simple without being simplistic, and gives a lower level framework to the one established by the EB, and gives a low level, more granular framework within which the working groups can operate. Okay, so all right, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Darren. Maybe there are questions to this, but I suggest that we leave that till afterwards. And now,
It's the second from the bottom.
yeah, thank you, Andy.
Okay. We obviously, when we submitted our report this year, it's big, it's detailed. If you want to find dirt, that's the place to go. So I'm just trying to hit some of the highlights, and in particular, talk about some shifts in the activities of the technical committee that started taking place this past year and are going into the next few years. Could you, next slide? So the 23-24 highlights have really been, these are really focusing on some of the broader work we've done. I mean, we've always continued to do, helping doing the review and publication of products and getting those ready. So that's kind of our ongoing work. So that's not highlighted as much here. But one of the things we did do is we developed a process for the publication of official documents. Those are things like best practices. The products of the glossary group fall under that. Major technical things that that need a level of review to make sure that they are meeting both the needs for accuracy, coverage, and comprehension that our more official documents need to have. We've put this in place this year, and DexCOS working group served as our guinea pig with their best practices document, and really helped us get some of the kinks out of this. So we really appreciate their work, and we are now going through the same process with the glossary group. So that is, it's good to have that piece underway. In the past, we've only had these processes in place for actual DDI specification products. One of the biggest things that we're happy to be getting out the door in the next few days, weeks, is the resolution system for the DDI controlled vocabularies, and then its accompanying support for resolution of RDF vocabularies. This is being done with support from both the UKDA, which is supporting the system, and GASIS, which has been providing a lot of the programming work for for the production process of that. It's involved a lot of negotiations with CESDA, so I really want to thank, particularly thank Darren and Oliver for their, as well as Sonda and her group for, keeping at this and keeping that process moving, because if things could drive people to drink, this is one of those tasks that could. So we're really happy to get this going and having it getting out the door in time to support the RDF vocabularies from CDI and those that are being developed for life cycle, as those are rolling out the door later in the first half of this coming fiscal year. The third one is the focus on the technical infrastructure. During the past year, a number of issues have come up, difficulties and problems with Bitbucket, the whole issue with the DDI Alliance web pages, and they'll be going into that further in the meeting, and also just the overall shift from moving from handcrafted products to systems where we can do the development work, push a button, produce out products, which will not only improve the ability of our members and product users to contributing to that development work, but will also make it much easier to go in and review specific updates and specific pieces of the of a product or any new content within it, which has always been a problem in our past and resulted in these kind of big bang productions that are difficult to review and assess. Next slide. Okay, there's a couple of the focus of the working group in 2025. One is the migration of the DDI Alliance web pages from the University of Michigan. We will be creating a parallel website for testing, switch it to the new website, and then work on the revision of the sitemap and functionality. And as I said, there's more on this later in the program, so I'm not going to go into it any further. We've been working on the organization of infrastructure space to support automated production, including multiple syntaxes. And if you don't have an automated production system, trying to produce multiple syntaxes that are parallel in time so that they all contain the same thing is difficult to impossible. On top of which, many of the people that have been handcrafting these products over the years are aging out. Achim has done a lot of work in this, and he retired in the past year. I've retired from the university, but not DDI yet. But I do a lot of the handcrafting for that. So getting these things moving into a process that is automated not only improves their longevity and the ability to keep up quality in them, but also, as I said, helps to support multiple syntaxes, better involvement of our community. We are in the process of the Lifecycle 4.0. We have been doing beta testing on the first version. We will be revising that and doing a beta test 2, and that is simply a structural difference between, it's not a content difference, but a structural difference between what are we on? 3.4, 3.6, whatever. And the 4.0, but also just the whole development and production measurement moving to COGS. We will be looking at explorations on options for codebook, and then this whole infrastructure is designed to kind of pull together in one place the support for SDTL, XCOS, DDI, CDI. XCOS and SDTL were already on GitHub. We've moved the other products over, and so we're still in the process of fine-tuning that and organizing that. Next slide. The DDI product site, Darren brought up this whole idea of document coverage and organization. When you have multiple products, there is the concern about how do those products fit together? What is the common content? And those may be very specific things like identification, use of controlled vocabularies. They're things that we want to work in similar way across our products. But the technical committee is kind of the overarching committee to make sure that we start getting materials out and information out to our users about how that fits together, about how that's presented, that helps support things like transformation from between products to support different uses. While complete content of one to the other is not necessarily available, there are key pieces of it that you would need to move over in order to leverage, say, the questionnaire aspects of life cycle or the cross-domain work in the new CDI. And so we need to understand what pieces move, how they move, and how they may transform as they go into different products. So that's something that we really want to focus on. And the other is just how we do business. We had talked in the past years and in this year of making sure that there's a working group for each active product. In the past, the DDI has been seen as, well, they're the people that do life cycle and codebook. And as you see, there's a lot more things that we do. And so we would like to get off into separate working groups, people that are focused on life cycle development and codebook development, as we move out of that physical shift of life cycle production from handcrafted to the COGS environment, then establish a working group for life cycle to look at content development and continued development of that product. And as we get 2.6 in codebook out the door, to establish a working group that is looking at codebook and what the options are for that. This also means that the other piece of this is to get topic coverage specifically out of, new topic coverage out of the specific domains and being developed within individual products and done in a more cross-product environment to see, so that there's an analysis of where this content should be supported, what information is needed, what do people want to be able to do with this, so that we can see what products that should go in, where the commonality should be, and then try and get it into those products in a more consistent way, so we're not constantly playing catch up between products of, well, this one allows you to do this, but we've got the bug in and we're going to fix this in this one, but it hasn't been done yet, so that there's a more consistency across products. Next slide.
1 minute.
Okay. Implication. This is the last slide. This means a shift in focus for TC. We're moving the development for the working groups, for the product groups, out of TC. We're pushing to help do content requirement development first, and then move it back into the product groups. Infrastructure management. The infrastructure managers support the long-term viability, the resolution systems for the vocabularies and product syntaxes, increased attention to that overall product mix and coverage, and then focus on cross-product documentation. What are common features? How things work? What are, working with multiple products to better support fair usage and the DDI content. So we're kind of pulling back into that more overarching view and providing the support environment to the working groups themselves.
Okay, thank you very much, Wendy. And now I'm a little curious, is Dan Gilman here?
He was earlier.
He was earlier, but he isn't in now because he was
Oh
supposed
yeah,
to be.
I can see him.
He's
He's
there.
logged on. Oh, there he is.
Yeah.
Dan, are you there? Dan Gilman? Are you there? It's your turn to present now for the glossary group, 5 minutes. Are you ready? You must share your own screen. Dan, can you hear us?
think Dan's having trouble with his microphone, Hilda, if I'm.
Okay, so,
Why don't you go on to the next group and then come back to him?
yeah, I think so. So, the next two presentations really will be by Dan Smith, that he will talk about SDTL, the SDTL work. The George Ota is leading that, but Dan will talk it, and also for the new RDF equivalence group. And then I will.
Sorry, Hilda, can you hear me?
Yeah, okay, yeah, you're there. And do you have will you please share your screen and give a 5 minutes presentation?
I don't have any slides.
Okay.
I just thought that there's not that much to say.
Okay, fine.
So I thought creating slides was not necessary. So the glossary group has been meeting regularly until about a month and a half ago, when we completed all of the terms that are on the list. So if you go to the glossary group site in Confluence, there is a page that has the list of all the terms. There are about 90 of them. We spent quite a bit of time developing definitions and explanatory notes for all of them. And then we sent them to Hilda and the scientific board for a formal review. And the first step of that, as Wendy indicated, was a review by the TC. We've received about a dozen comments so far, and we're in the process of beginning to resolve them. Those comments are in a Jira site set up for us, and we'll be recording the results of the review there and making changes in the page. At some point in the future, when the review is complete, then we're going to have to work with somebody to actually publish the page. So the current glossary resides on the Alliance website, and our hope is that our work will replace it. And I don't have anything more to say. If there are any questions, I'm happy to try to answer them.
Okay, you have time for a question. Anybody have questions for Dan? Well, thank you very much, Dan. And then we.
Sorry for the technical problems.
No, that applies to us all. So I'm just happy you could come and give your presentation. So then, thank you
Thanks
very
for the
much.
time.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. And now I will share again. And the next presenter is Dan Smith. And first, we will do SDTL. Are you ready, Dan?
Yep. Okay. Thanks, Hilda. Yeah, so this is just an update on the work of the group over the past year. So SDTL, for people that aren't familiar, is the structured data transform language. And it provides a structure for representing in a common format different scripts or programs from statistical data processing software. It's been a product that was published by the Alliance a couple of years ago. And over the past year, we've been working on ways to improve querying that information. So as you can imagine, a common way for representing a structured statistical program could be very verbose There's lots of nesting, there's lots of ordering. And for some of the common questions you might have about a program, such as what variables affect another variable, the queries could be quite complex. So we've been working on another tool called SDTH, which is the Structured Data Transformation History, which can kind of take the information from a SDTL structure and present it in a smaller representation that is good for answering a specific set of very common queries. It's based, or it extends the W3C PROV model, and it contains about a dozen different predicates and types, and it's very focused on steps within a program, data sets that are produced within a program, and instances or states of variables between program steps. So our work plan for the coming year is to complete the RDF representation of SDTL. There's a preview of that available on our work group's GitHub page. And then also to publish the SDTH as part of a follow-on version for SDTL. So the next version of SDTL, we hope to include both of these tools. If there's any questions, I can take those now. And if there's no questions, we can move on to the next set of slides.
Okay. So, voilà.
Okay, so this is an update about a new working group that was formed about 5 or 6 months ago. We can go to the next slide.
Okay.
So congratulations to the DDI Alliance. This coming year, we're going to have 5 products that have RDF representations. One of the things about having 5 products with RDF representations is that a lot of the things that these different products talk about are similar or equivalent, but described differently with different types or different predicates in the different products. So the goal of the RDF equivalence group is to create mappings between different classes which are the same or equivalent. And we think that this might be good for producing documentation to show what's common between the different products, and also for allowing people to create Sparkle queries that might function against multiple products without having to change your query too much. So that's the current work plan. We have possible future plans, which, depending on how well the equivalent class work goes, we might expand the scope to include some equivalent properties if equivalent properties exist across different products. And we also might explore mapping to different classes or properties in other ontologies, such as schema.org. Okay, the next slide. So this group is very new, but we have completed a couple tasks. We've established the group. We've set up a GitHub repository for our work products and issue tracking. We set up a description page on the DDI Atlassian site. And we've sent an announcement asking for additional participation. And we've received several responses, which is always good. The next slide. So upcoming tasks for the next year. Now that CDI, DDI Lifecycle 4, and SDTL2, along with our existing controlled vocabularies and XCOS, are all going to be available, we're going to have an initial kickoff meeting to start this work. The main things that we're going to be focusing on in the first year is developing a process for proposing candidate equivalences. Then we're going to develop a process for how to approve and publish those candidate equivalences. And also then some technical tooling to set up the continuous integration for processing the mapping files for generating the OWL axioms for the equivalent classes and perhaps equivalent properties. And then, of course, publishing the documentation on the upcoming DDI Alliance documentation site. So with that, if there's any questions on this.
Just a comment, Dan, Aravan here. As you get into this, I've been working in World Fair a lot with schema.org in a bunch of different use cases in that project, including the cross-domain interoperability framework. That involves handoffs between schema.org and DDI CDI, specifically around variables. I'd be really interested in making sure that what we're doing in that group aligns with what's coming out of this one. Not a trivial problem, but something I think that we should pay attention to as the RDF equivalent stuff gets more mature. And I think the time frame here will be good because we'll have something in hand to show you at the kickoff meeting, maybe. But
Yeah, that'll be great. Yeah,
but
like
I'd-
this, like the schema.org statistical variable would be a good one because I think there are some things that map and some things that don't really conceptual map between some of the DDI product variable types and that. So yeah, that's be a good discussion to have.
that's exactly it. You've hit it. You've nailed it on the head in one. So, but just to comment on that, because I think it would be very important to get that aligned.
Okay, very interesting,
Okay,
and
thank you.
thank you very much, Dan, and for your comment,
Yeah,
Arfan.
sorry, Steve's got your hand up. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, so I was just going to actually pick up just a little bit. Arafan kind of beat me to the punch a little bit, but we did some work at Darkstall last year, and I know you're using SysOM as the sort of the candidate for just sort of documenting the mappings. As I and a lot of it was actually exploring how we could use that for kind of describing variable relationships. Any tooling that you sort of mentioned, sort of generation of the mappings, but yeah, sort of any sort of tooling that exists there would be pretty helpful, I think. So we can kind of feed that into the discussion as well, I would think.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much, Steve, for your comment. Very useful. And now, Catherine, will you talk a little about the achievements of the training group? Can you see my screen now, Catherine?
I can, thank you.
Very good. And you can let me know if you want me to scroll down, okay?
Thank you. So I'm chairing the DDI training group right now, and Haley just rotated off as co-chair. So thanks very much to Haley and Alina for co-chairing the last couple years. And yeah, so we published several slide decks on Zenodo, and you can see the list here. We've done some other collaborations to produce some slide decks in the French language. And there's some usage statistics copied from Zenodo there. I guess you can scroll down a little bit, Hilda. We've completed several other activities. And I will say that at Eddie, we had a side meeting and got feedback that the executive board was happy with the work so far. So that is good to hear. Held some trainings, handled some different training requests that came through online. And then we held a virtual meet and greet session on World Preservation Day. And so, yeah, overall, pretty busy. And Hilda, if you can't share it, I can share my screen. We have we've worked on our draft of the mandate for the training group. So I can go to that. Okay, can everyone see my screen?
I can see it.
Okay, great, thank you. So it's a draft, so excuse all the busyness with the comments and whatnot, but reflecting on the last couple years and thinking ahead, and looking at the mandate that the executive or the scientific board shared, we tried to align points with that and update it. And the key takeaways from this are that we've been doing some tasks that we feel fall within the scope of other groups, such as marketing. And we also determined that the getting started pages was like inactive and done. So basically we've cleaned up our mandate a little bit. And it's been communicated to us, and we've been talking in our monthly meetings about framing trainings around audiences. And so Arafan drafted an audiences document that our training group all gave feedback on. And so we need to get back to that, but that'll help inform some definitions of audiences. But we're unclear on which audience to focus on. And I think some of the feedback we received is that our training request should inform this decision about audiences to focus on. But I would say that so far from just the last couple that have come in, and I don't want to create a recency effect, but just FYI, from what I can tell, people are interested in how to incorporate DDI into their data management plans, which I'm not sure falls within the scope of the training working group. But we can talk about that. Essentially, we want to expand our materials and explore more translations in different languages. And we do want to focus on audiences appropriately. You know, we want to continue engagement at conferences and explore collaborations with different organizations to seek out some of those new communities of users, such as in the different regions mentioned in the scientific board mandate. And we'll continue to do some promotion to make sure that our training and materials are appropriately shared, but we see this as a temporary task. We really need a defined stream in order to make sure that we reach, that the information about what's available reaches as many people as possible, and effectively who needs the information. But yeah, we're having a hard time making that work with our current activities. Does anyone have any questions?
Well, I just want to thank you for all the great work you are doing. It's really amazing what this group of people can achieve. And thank you very much for taking on the role of Catherine.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a good group, and, you know, thanks to everyone involved. And thank you for your kind words.
Thank you. And now let's move to one of the new groups. Let me share again. And one of the new groups, the questions and questionnaire. Romain, please.
Yes, I'm just waiting for you to share your screen, and then
Oh,
I'll start.
Can you see? Can you see it now? Can you see it now?
No, I don't think I'm the only one.
Okay. Can you see it now?
Yes, it's up. So you can go to the next slide. It was just the front slide. So just a quick word on the inception or the birth of this group. Maybe you can go down with your with the arrows or yes, thank you. So basically, this group is very new. There was some kind of zero meeting that happens in April, just before the Cosmos conference, on whether or not it was a good idea. There was a problem at ends that needs that we need a proper DDI working group. So effectively, this meeting shows that there were some questions around how to manage to design the questions and questionnaires using DDIs during one of the brainstorm session during the meeting. Some issues like the two ones highlighted there were raised around the fact that there was no such guidelines for helping with building or managing questionnaires in DDI, and also some other issue around whether you should choose a code book or lifecycle, or whether you have to migrate from one to the other. So basically, this whole day was the realization that yes, we need a proper working group for that. Eldar, could you proceed? Yes. So the mission statement of this group is to provide guidelines for building and managing questions and questionnaires using different DDI products. So the main focus for now is around codebooks and lifecycle, but we are fairly sure that we will extend it to other standards. Also, one of the key objectives that we identify is the fact that we will need to talk to other aspect groups in order to identify different kind of material that will help with designing those guidelines and reaching out to people that needs help. Especially, we identify the need for dedicating training material, and so that will be one of the main objectives. And if you can just go to the next slide, thank you. So yes, precisely around the collaboration that we will have to set up. So obviously, one that we will make happen with the training working group, but also different communities, the DDI developers community, because there was issues around the tools that you can use or we can build for managing questionnaires and questions. Also, so the Paradata working group is dead now, but at the time where we had this discussion, we thought that it would be a good idea to reach to that. But yes, we don't want to raise the group from the dead, but maybe at some point in time we will talk about handling Paradata. And also, yeah, probably some other kind of collaboration that we didn't identify yet. Also, this group is probably not a short-lived group because the problem that we have at hand is already a large one, but also we are at the moment focusing on questionnaire, but we found that probably the group would evolve in order to work around a more general data collection issues or problems or guidelines around those.
1 minute left.
Yes. So no. If you can go back to this section, yes, just in order to highlight the short-term work. So the next meeting that will be, in fact, the first meeting, proper meeting of this group will be on the 1st of June. The idea will be to set up collaboration with all the members, and also how we will collaborate, what would be the tools we use, the meeting frequency, etc., etc. So the basis on collaboration, but also we already have 3 items on which we would work starting starting June. So we will design a survey in order to identify tools and experts that we can reach to. Also, as I mentioned earlier, there is already a focus on training materials, so we will properly identify training topics, and also we would like to update the DDI website tooling page in order to list tools, existing tools, maybe update what is already available, etc., etc. And just a light slide before this one. When I just put the link to the conference section already populated with some contents, notes from the previous meeting, the list of members, objective, etc., etc. So we will update it on a monthly basis, I guess. Thank you.
Thank you, Ramon. I saw Wendy raised her hand. A quick comment, Wendy. Wendy, would you like to comment? Okay, so if
maybe later.
Yeah, maybe later. Okay, thank you very much, Ramon. It's great that this group has started, and I'm sure you will do something good on this topic. And now, then we move to the next section, which is new products and discussion topics. And there we start with the DDI website with Darren. So I'll find that presentation. Let's see.
Okay, cool. All right. Thanks, Hilda. Okay, I'll keep this brief because I think we're about 5-10 minutes behind. At the moment, we are planning out a DDI website redevelopment. And the reason this has come to pass is because ICPSR have been looking to divest themselves of the management of the DDI Alliance website. Simultaneously, we were considering how we could better structure and represent documentation on an AWS cloud instance. So there's a number of things that have come together, which mean that what originally started as a couple of ideas floating around has turned into something more substantial. Now, because of the new strategy, which is really about how do we align the products, how do we engage and expand and do better product marketing, we've seen this as an opportunity to take the existing website, take it off Drupal on ICPSR, clean it up and restructure it and do some level of rebranding. Now, one of the things we'd really like to do is separate out what is, content management from resources like tools, development tools, those kinds of things. So we're looking to decouple the documentation from the page content while making sure that that kind of remains integrated. Next slide, Hilda. So one of the issues we're trying to address is that, this is just a sample of where you can find different resources for DDI Alliance products. These all have their own home and their own purpose. But what we're trying to do is make this less intimidating for the user. And we talked earlier about better signposting. It's just how do we navigate more cleanly around these different sets of resources for the different products so that users, whoever they might be, which audience they belong to, can easily locate what they need quickly. And it's not a major operation to link those new resources into existing content web pages. Next slide. So over the last couple of months, technical committee have been looking at the existing website and considering a number of different options. ICPR one proposal was that we just migrate the existing website over to a WordPress instance. In terms of having the freedom and latitude to be able for the Alliance to manage the website, that's not necessarily the best thing to do. So really, we've decided that the approach we're going to take is take the existing content on Drupal and the DDI Alliance website and migrate that onto something like HubSpot. I mean, there are 1,000 of these kinds of platform as a service web platforms, something that's very easy to manage in a browser in terms of generating content and structuring the content. And at the same time, we have a new AWS instance under ICPSR's platform. And the idea is that you should be able, if you have a new tool, just to be uploaded easily. That would presumably go through some kind of approval by TC, but it should be much easier to upload content, whether that's tooling, markup examples, or those kinds of documents. The working assumption is that will sit under docs.ddalliance.org, but the idea is this will be an opportunity to build lots of tighter integration between the different resources and the different content that's currently instantiated on lots of different kind of URLs and sites at the moment. Next slide, Hilda. So what will be happening in the next few months is in the next 2 to 3 months, we'll be developing a more detailed specification as to what bits go into either the documentation platform or the content management platform. We'll be looking to do a sprint in July to do a kind of lift and shift. We're not going to do a massive root and branch restructuring of the website initially. The important thing is to get it off ICPR's Drupal platform. And then in the autumn, if everything's going well, we should be able to do a first kind of version 1 migration. What we would do then in early 25 is do more of that kind of root and branch analysis of user journeys, information architecture, optimal kind of internal linkage, search engine optimization, all those kinds of things. So it's a 2-step kind of process over the next year, 18 months, really. Next slide. So yes, I mean, this is the community's website, and TC are kind of running with us at the moment, but we're very keen to hear your ideas, whether you want to see additional functionality that's not there, or are there some things that are really making your life hard and you think could be improved. And we'd also like to have some volunteers to do some testing on that kind of initial website, probably around August and September. So I'm happy for you to email me, if you are interested in doing that. I'll send out an email on the kind of email list as well. But yeah, I mean, if anyone's got any particular outstanding ideas they want to raise here, I'd be happy to hear them. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, any questions or comments or ideas for Darren just now? Or would you like to think about this and get back? Okay, thank you very much, Darren, and thank you all for taking on this task. Now we move to DDI CDI with Arafan first, and then Noemi with the subgroup afterwards. Arafan, are you ready?
Yes, thanks, Hilda. Okay, so next, please. I'm going to try to keep this quite quick, as a lot of this isn't new. The thing we're focused on in the CDI working group generally is getting the specification approved. We've turned the second candidate release over to TC now, and that's undergoing a focused review. So a select group of people looking particularly at the syntax representation, because it's the first really model-driven from the ground up standard with multiple syntax representations. So JSON LD and Turtle and XML schema. After that, there'll be a webinar to the DDI community to explain how CDI fits in with the overall product suite. And we've tried to be good citizens about that initiative within the Alliance. because there is this idea of a product suite emerging that's much stronger than it's been. After that, we'll have the vote. That should happen in September. It could have maybe happened earlier in the summer, but we didn't want to run afoul of people taking vacations. Everything is going to be happening in Git, because rather than do this in Bitbucket and then have to migrate, we figured we might as well put a new product on the new platform. So there's going to be two repositories, one for the model and the specification, specifically with the issues tracked there, and then another for resources. So things like code and implementation guides and tools and so on. Next slide, please. Our immediate focus right now is getting ready to support that release on the assumption that it gets voted up. We really break that out into two areas, documentation and tools. In terms of the documentation, as long ago as 2 years, we started working on documents. A lot of work last year at Dagstuhl and subsequently. We have a good overview document. There's a document about working with other standards. We're looking at documenting the variable cascade more. We have a how-to guide for creating community implementation guides. There's a reference implementation document that came out of the Paris face-to-face before Cosmos. There are a bunch of others. So we want to come out the starting gate with good documentation. It's a big model, not as big as Lifecycle, but still pretty big. And people need guidance how to use it and implement it. So we're trying to support that. In terms of tools and syntax, we have quite an active group that's been looking at this, again, for the past couple of years. And Akim's pulled together a resources page that sort of gives you links to all the different tools and syntax representation approaches. The tool that we're using to produce our own documentation for the spec and the syntax representations is based on an OMG standard called model to text. There's an open source package called Excelio we're using. And that same tooling also can be used for doing things like documentation of community profiles that looks like the full documentation and has all those features, but is only the classes you're interested in. Early implementers have used that. They like it quite well. We have a bunch of different code around syntax representation in Python and R. They're looking at Shackle and so on. There's a lot there. So those are both the areas where we're really focused in supporting the release once that's out. Next slide, please. We also have a list of topics of things that we need to get to that are more on the modeling side. This is not as high priority, obviously, with the new spec. Noémie's going to be talking about the qualitative or non-quantitative subgroup, and that's a new development. We know that we want to look at complex units of measure, and there are a lot of other people questioning this now. Good presentation at Cosmos from a guy at the OECD who was looking at BIPM and saying, hey, these units of measure don't work with economics. There's a group in CoData called the Digital Representation of Units of Measure that interfaces with a lot of the standards bodies there. So people we can reach out to and work with, but that's an area. We know through some work already at Dagstuhl with iAdopt from RDA that there's a way of describing variable dependencies. We know CDI will support it up to a point. We need to do some more work there. We are very thin on the way we do variable statistics and summary stats. That can be improved. There are some features like describing slices of cubes where we could align better with STMX. And there are a handful of these kinds of issues. And then we have to take on board any issues arising from implementation. Next slide, please. We have a potential new product. In order to develop DDI CDI, we had to create something called UCMIS, the UML class model interoperable subset, which is really just those features of UML that describe data models, so just class models, but that can be expressed using canonical XMI that is well supported by all the major UML tools. It was a lot of work to figure this out. It's documented as part of the CDI documentation, but other people have said to us, could we use that, just that piece of it? And so we think that because we've done the work to create it, it would be fairly easy to produce that as a DDI output. And so that's something we're going to be exploring the next little while. And my last slide, Hilda. This slide is really just to show the amount of stuff that's going on. A big part of the job in the coming year is going to be staying on top of who's using CDI and implementing it. And we have had a lot of implementation already, and we're going to have a lot more. The cross-domain interoperability framework is going to be done at the end of this month. It uses a minimum profile of DDI CDI. I think that's going to drive adoption. The UKDA product builder implemented CDI. We had this EOSC Futures ESS Labs implementation of the process model in climate neutral and smart cities. The US Bureau of Labor did some implementation. You may have seen Dan's presentation on that. Interestingly, the UN Statistical Division just did a service that hits SDMX standard web services and generates DDI CDI from them. They were working with the ILO web service. The intention of that is to take the DDI CDI and use it as a way of working with the Sustainable Development Goal indicator disaggregations in Google Data Commons. And that's really exciting when you think about it. If that service could hit any SDMX web service and generate DDI CDI directly from it. And so we have things like that coming out of left field, which are really, really exciting. The developers group has been working on something called Nectar Publisher, which is a sort of CSV and Excel to DDI tool, supports codebooks, supports CDI. I think they're working on lifecycle. SICT has done an SPSS Stata prototype. I think that's getting baked into World Fair now. I am aware of several EU Horizon and EOSC Oscar bids that feature DDI CDI, one of them on X-ray absorption spectroscopy, which is completely new kind of data, but data that gets used a lot in things like public health and environmental toxicology, a bunch of things around environment and climate data and so on. So there's some really exciting potentials there. We have an active collaboration just starting up with Dataverse. They support Codebook. They have DDI CDI implementation on their roadmap for the coming year, and we're inviting one of their people, one of the Harvard engineers, to Dagstuhl this year. There's been an RFP for a new standard coming out of OMG. I think Dan Gilman was very involved in this, and that is basically determining whether there needs to be a new, very broad statistical standard. And DDI CDI is mentioned in that document, in that call for proposals. And we've reached out to them and said, what can we do to support this? It would be great if OMG decides to base some of their work on our work. The collaboration with UNECE Modern Stats around SDMX and DDI is heating up, and that involves, to some extent, the CDI SDMX alignment. And yes, we are looking at Croissant. CDIF specifically is looking at Croissant. And that's something we need to explore more. If you don't know what Croissant is, it's a Google-inspired standard for documenting data for large language model training sets and making fair data more sort of AI friendly, if you will, which is a little scary, but that's something we are proactively looking into. Amber just put that in the chat. And that's my last slide. So now I'm going to hand over to you, Naomi. I hope I didn't take too much time.
Okay, Noemi, I will find your presentation. Just a second.
Okay, thank you. Hi, everyone, and you can please go to next slide. Yeah, thank you. The first thoughts about this subgroup were initiated during the last Dagstuhl workshop, where a small group was asked to consider how non-numeric, non-coded data could be addressed by the CDI model. At EDI 2022, we presented that Qualidata Network developed in the context of the National Research Data Infrastructure in Germany to promote access to and reuse of qualitative data. QualiDataNet thought it would be a good idea to take over and continue the work of the small Dagstuhl working group. So at EDI 23, we presented our initiative and tried to reach out to interested people to become part of this subgroup. Since then, we had our kickoff meeting on March 1st, and we have been meeting twice a month for a total of 4 meetings since then. Next slide, please. This group is focused on the description of qualitative data from any discipline or domain. So we mean qualitative as the nature or type of data, and not just data collected using qualitative methods. Our goal is to make qualitative data usable and interoperable
Here we see the potential of qualitative data regardless of disciplines and methods, describing it in ways that it can be used as the source of research. Next slide, please. At the moment, we are mostly from the social science, but in our current phase, we are trying to identify who from other disciplines is working with qualitative data. Again, qualitative data in a broader sense. And we meet every 2 weeks on Fridays. Yeah. And we have also on the Confluence site that is linked here. I will put the link in the chat right now. Next slide, please. The plan of future activities chronologically is the state of the art and outreach, analyze the status quo, who is doing what with qualitative data, and assemble a team of specialists from different disciplines who can provide use cases where qualitative data is needed as input to analysis, and contact also initiatives working on related data interoperability solutions. Then collection of the use case for applying the CDI model to non-numeric and qualitative data, collection of use case regardless of the research measure or discipline, and with different focus or data types with an interest in describing non-numeric data objects that could be used for different analysis purposes, including qualitative analysis. And then a test phase, test the collected use case against the W3C standards proposed at the Dextal workshop and make recommendations for adapting the model to these standards in order to cover this use case. And finally, the final report with the test use case, the best practice solutions for improving interoperability of qualitative data, and the concrete implementation proposals for DDI, CDI, a new module or classes. We will see. We have to figure it out. Next slide, please. Here only a short example of a use case. Maybe photos shared through social media channels. Social media data represents an important source of information, not only for social science research, but also for other domains in biodiversity, for example. With the rise in popularity of social media and camera phones, millions of people are now sharing their photographs online, which can be an effective source of biodiversity occurrence data. And finally, the next slide, please. If you have more use case or you know someone that could be interested in joining us, please get in touch. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Noemi, and thank you also, Arafan. It's really amazing what's going on in the CDI working group, both on the level of the model itself and the tooling around it, and the outreach and implementation, and also now the new quality, the focus on qualitative data within that. So thank you very much. And any comments or questions for Arafan and Noemi just now? If not, we move forward to the last presentation, and that is now DDI lifecycle for 0 beta 1, and that it will be presented by John.
Hi, I'll try to keep this short because I know we're running slightly over time. Okay, do you want the next slide, please? Yeah, so it's been a long time in the works, really. I mean, as Wendy said, we've been handcrafting life cycle for well, a long time, too long. So you know, it wasn't just the handcrafting of it; it was the fact that it was just in XML, and obviously trying to get to XML to other things isn't always straightforward. So it made, trying to make other serializations, RDF or or even write Python classes or whatever. Very, very difficult. And it really was sort of stopping the sort of potential increased adoption of life cycle. So that's the sort of the top line, and that was the objective. And thanks to work that Collectica did, building this COGS system, it's allowed us to take the over a period of a couple of years to get to a point where we've now got DDI lifecycle into a model that's clean. We had some versions previously that were a bit workarounds, but this one is now a clean version of the model, which is really, really good for all sorts of reasons, not just for our sensibility, but also so that there's no hacks for people have to do to actually utilize it. And the nice thing about the model is that it's just CSV files, so there's a really low entry barrier to people to be able to contribute and add to the model, whether it's changes or additions or bugs. It's just a text editor, which almost anyone can do. And then you can also just generate your own local copy to check what's going on. So it's just super simple, super really easy to use. But yet has this sort of this power to generate all these artifacts that we're going to use to manage data. So the next slide, please. Yeah, so these are the serializations that are available in the beta release. So XML schema, we've deprecated the old style instance schemas and just gone to fragment schemas. So sort of technical reasons for that, but also it's it means that there's now one target flavor of XML, which is good. The JSON schema is a canonical UMI, so that fits in well with the work that the CDI group are doing. And there's two flavors of RDF OWL, one with more traditional relationships being established, and one that hasn't got those. So one with restrictions and one without, and then there's a checks and shackle to support that. And then there's HTML generated documentation and visualizations all generated from that one thing. So though that's in the beta, there are other serializations which we're working on, say Python, C#, and so on. And there's some work we've been doing. Well, Olaf, I think it was doing some work around I think called ML-lint, I think it's called, which allows us to generate different serializations without just straight from the model. So that's really, really cool, and will obviously allow the model to be used in a whole range of different situations. Next slide, please. So yeah, the advantages it really are that the documentation is now much more closely linked to the model, and that's a blessing for those people who have to do documentation. As I mentioned, it's easier to do new serialization, so Python, R, Java, whatever. These things are very doable with the current setup. The tracking changes between versions is more transparent, and that was the thing that was a bit of a pain in the proverbials to do in the previous sort of setup. Again, as I mentioned earlier, it's easier to make suggestions for bug fixes and features, and that hopefully will lower the barrier for people to interact with the model and understand it in a way that was quite difficult or quite arcane previously. So it's already been used for SDTL. Potentially, we're going to look looking at to use it as for codebook as well in a future iteration. And critically, it's made us less reliant on proprietary products. We're going to use a couple of proprietary products to generate things like the documentation previously. And yeah, so I think it's made a massive difference to the way we think about um, developing the standard, managing the standard, and I think it also means that we haven't got single points of failure. So almost anyone can step in and do the stuff. So these things are really, really important in terms of like the long-term stability and sustainability of the standard. And yeah, I think it's going to be an absolute blessing in terms of not just developing the product, but also being able to make it more easier to understand what the product's doing. I think a lot of people have commented that the documentation is so much easier to navigate and to understand in a way that was sometimes quite difficult with previous documentation. So we're looking to improve that. So just the last slide, I think. Yeah, so always looking for comments. So if you go to the GitHub repository, it will take you to some HTML documentation, or you can download the information there. So we're looking for some guidance, so feedback really on guidance and submitted changes. So yeah, I've claimed it was really easy. Is it? Just opinions on the flavor of JSON we put out, the flavors of RDFL and the Shex and Shackle as well will be helpful. And then obviously the documentation. So what you want to see in the documentation, what will be what are things that you would like to see. So whether it's more technical stuff, more examples, better coverage and so on, wherever those are, please do get in contact. So you can there's a review page, but also if you've got any issues or questions, you can post them on the issues in the GitHub repository, the Alliance /DDI model repository. So we would welcome any comments and thoughts you have over the next few months. Okay.
Thank you very much, John. And now we are back in time again, just back in time. So thank you for that also. And yeah, we are looking forward to see how this develops. And comments or questions for John just now on this? Okay, then let me see. Then I stop sharing. And now the floor is open for questions and comments. Let's check if we have got something in the chat. And if you have any questions or comments or things you would like us to focus on in the future or any input, then please raise your hand or add comments in the chat. So I'll try to go through what is there already. Let's see. Yeah, at least there's a comment from Amber. ISIS started an African chapter which was very successful in gathering people in Africa. That is very nice. Would you like to tell a little more about that, Amber?
Hi, Hildy. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. This was early on. Yeah, just to let people know that there are other efforts, and I think there's interest as well in learning more about South and Central America. And so I think this is great to know. And so I was just sharing the experiences of ISIS starting an Africa chapter, which allowed people to gather at a local university in an African country and invite African participants, and it was supported by ISIS.
Oh, that sounds really great, and thank you, Amber. That is really good news and great to hear. And you, Wendy, you are telling about the World Bank, how the World Bank work in expanding the use of codebook for Africa, Asia, and South Central America. Would you like to elaborate on that? I can't hear you, so
Hilda, I think Arafan's got his hand up.
Yeah,
okay.
Wendy's mic doesn't work, so she can't speak.
Okay.
I think two things, Hilda. I think what Wendy was referring to was the very widespread use of DDI through the IHSN network. Pretty much everywhere you go in Africa, they were using that tool set. The problem being that since Nestar was no longer supported and the World Bank is just now rolling out its replacement, that has had less impetus. But in many places, and Wendy is saying the entire Caribbean, yes, exactly. There's a lot of DDI that we don't think about in places like Africa and the Caribbean and Southeast Asia, some. So Wendy, was that the point you were going to make? Anyway, the reason I raised my hand, Hilda, was I just wanted to say that Darren presented this idea of discussions with W3C, and that's something Akim and I have at the scientific board's behest started discussions through Pierre-Antoine, explorations really, about how modular use of some portions of DDI might fit into that framework. I don't want to say anything definitive because we don't have any real conclusion from that yet, but those discussions have started and are ongoing. And I think that's very, very interesting in terms of adoption and visibility because of W3C's position. But we're actively following that up.
That is great to hear, Arafan, that this is ongoing, and that was also one of the tasks that were given to the CDI group at the Bergen meeting we had in October last year. So it's great that this is currently followed up. And you, Arafan, also made several other comments. Would you like to elaborate on any of those?
Oh, what Amber raised the specter of Croissant ML, which is a very, very lightweight metadata description of quantitative data for training sets. And the problem that they've been running into is that after years of saying, oh, metadata doesn't matter, the AI people are realizing that they get a lot less hallucination when they know what they're feeding their AIs with their LLMs specifically. That's worth watching. It's a pretty new thing. It's reasonably well tooled because it's coming out of Google. At first glance, it looks like a very, very weak version of DDI, frankly. Sort of describing variables and columns, very, very light on data typing, a little light on the semantics, but something that, as Wendy pointed out in the chat, I think that could potentially impact a lot of the products we put out. And I see it as a target as rolling a rock downhill from any of the DDI data descriptions. It would be very nice to have tools that would take our DDI and turn it into Croissant if we're feeding these data sets to LLMs as training sets. I think it would help people from abusing the data because they don't know what's in the data sets, which is what happens a lot today. So I think it's in some ways defensive, but something we should be aware of. And I think it was great that Amber raised that point.
And also, if Wendy is still not available to talk, there was one about the work of Pascal House in relation to AI tools and exploring DDI standards. I don't know, Wendy, if you are there, you can
I don't know.
talk.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, now you're there.
Oh, hey, she's
Hello.
back. Good. I talk faster than I type. Yeah, he's been experimenting with, he's initially started with some of the CDI documentation and feeding that in, but also then looking at doing that more broadly. We've just had a few initial conversations. I've passed it on to both John and Darren also, because I think while, there might be some very targeted test objects, that it's something that we should be approached more broadly across DDI and not just focused on one or two products. He agrees. So obviously they all have different content in terms of, and different structured content. So the fact that we are moving into more tools that generate our products and generate the support documentation is a huge step up for him because it gives it a uniform base to be pulling from and exploring. So I think that's just it's something that will gain more traction and just looking at some ways to exploit that, and it fits in with his works, which is the good thing. So it's something that will continue on.
Yeah, very interesting. And Arafan, do you have anything to add to that?
Sorry, I
Or-
think Dan's got his hand up, Hilda.
Okay,
I'm
okay.
waiting patiently.
Yeah, okay, done.
Yeah, I was gonna add something to what Arafan said before about metadata and AI, ML. The BLS is looking at this. I actually developed a model a few years ago for describing that, and there's work to resurrect it and try to apply it to what's going on there. There's a lot of work on AI at BLS going on now.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, and then there was some discussion about Dataverse. Amber, would you like to say something about that? You added some comments.
Yeah, I think overall, like there are so many projects that are just emerging through the Dataverse community that touch on DDI, right? So I'm just trying to think of them conceptually in my head, and I'm breaking them down and like trying to map them to everything that's going on. So there are a lot of things. I think, yes, of course, the objective is to publish DDI, and AI will absolutely be able to learn DDI and all of its structures, but how does it map to sort of these other larger research initiatives and in thinking through like how you can do discovery across different domains and sectors and data types? That there's just some interesting conversations there. So I think that we have to stay open to understanding it and being able to support those initiatives.
Yeah, interesting. And somebody else would like to add to that Dataverse point?
Hilda, only that we've invited a number of people, Amber, to come to Dagstuhl this fall to work on specifically the DDI CDI portion of this. But I think one of the main Harvard developers is going to be coming, Amber, and I think we've invited a number of people, Victoria and so on, who could work on the tooling specifically around Dataverse and DDI and what that interchange looks like. So I feel like there is some concrete action as well as a lot of plans, as you mentioned. It's hard to know exactly what all that's going to look like at this point, but yeah, Amber, if you can, if you're not planning on coming to Dagstuhl, think again, and if you are, great. So, I think it's just worth pointing out, Hilda, that there's been a lot of communication there, and I think we'll see some movement in that space on some of these topics in the coming year.
Very good.
And I'd also like to add that Dataverse has in this past development of Codebook 2.6 has been very involved in that, and we're hoping that as we make lifecycle easier to be involved in that development, that they'll expand into that also. So I'm just saying that they have a good track record of trying to be involved in the development org of DDI to make sure that there's good synergy between the two.
And then there is one from Tethering. I think I heard one of the presenters group mention that they wanted to focus on stats agency. I'm curious how we might go about identifying and prioritizing audience for DDI training and the like. And interest in news about the restarting of the marketing Catherine, would you like to elaborate on that? And maybe somebody could take up on that.
Thanks, Hilda. Yes, so it's pretty straightforward, you know, like I mentioned in my updates that we have a document that Aerofan started to kind of define the different groups, but I'm interested in any feedback that you know, people here might have on how we might say, okay, well, this group should be this year, or this audience should be this year, and next year it would be this, like how we can, you know, basically number them so that we can know what we want to address. And then, you know, the marketing group thing, that's just related to, like I said, there are tasks that people in the training group are doing, and we're, you know, they're doing them well enough, but we could do so much better if we had like a point person to communicate things to that could then be the, like, you know, connection to the spider web of getting things out into the universe. And it looks like Wendy has her hand raised.
Yeah, I was just more focused on the particular group of the statistical agencies. We did a presentation, we did a session at ISI World Statistical Conference 2 years ago in Ottawa, and there has been a lot of, historically, there has been a lot of involvement of statistical agencies with DDI. And so there's a lot of things there and connections to go back to. We still have people that are involved in them. I think Frank is on this call, Flavio in Ottawa. So there's a lot of people and a lot of connections there that we can leverage back into, as well as those connections that we've already talked about earlier in terms of the UNECE work and those initiatives. Just making sure that we don't lose those contacts, because I think once again, many of those things tend to be on working with individuals from DDI as well as the statistical agencies. And as those contacts age out or people shift their positions, we need to make sure that those are more organizational relationships. Not necessarily, it's not a training group issue. That is definitely more of a marketing and a connections type of thing and interactions than, say, training. But I think that's definitely one of the groups that we can really exploit.
Thank you, Wendy. It looks like, I don't know who raised their hand first. It looks like John and Arafan both have their hands raised.
I guess I was first, John, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to back up what Wendy said with a little bit of specifics. I've been working with Flavio, who's very active with the Modern Stats group at UNECE. We will be doing a presentation at their next group meeting. There's a lot of interest in FAIR in that community, and I feel like there's a bit of a convergence around their main tool is lifecycle. CDI is something they're somewhat interested in. I think some of the RDF work is going to impact them. XGOS, they're one of the big user communities for XGOS. I do think there's a training opportunity there, but there's a lot of lead time in that world. It would be nice if we could work with Inkyung and maybe do some webinars with them, things like that. But I think the time is right to work with those guys. There's renewed interest in DDI in that community, and we're going to reach out to them. But I do think that training could easily be part of that picture. And should be, honestly. So I think there's we can talk specifics, Catherine, but I think we have some opportunities there.
Thank you, Arafan. John, do you want to go next?
Yeah, so I mean, yes, exactly, Arafan. I think that is exactly the reason why I think the executive board is proposing that we dig in on stats agencies over the next period, because there is that renewed interest. And I also think that there are, the modernisation of stats program hasn't touched all parts of the international statistics agencies, but it has made a big dent in it. And I think the role of DDI, and particularly around FAIR as well, is really, really important. And I think that's why we want to go down that route. I think the other thing is also that there are willing volunteers, and I think that's the other reason for for this is because we haven't got a marketing group at the moment. We did try to put a call out for marketing group, and that didn't really generate any buzz. So, you know, I think the reason that we're doing this is really sort of to try to step into at least set up some marketing activities, which hopefully will involve people, at least initially from the stats agencies, if not from other parts of the DDI community, to try to bump start a functioning marketing working group. So I think that's the other sort of thought that's going along with that process. More at the annual meeting.
Yeah, so thank you, John. Now we have 2 minutes left, and there is some comments here from about the stat agencies and what Dan organized, and also yeah, that Flavio is the chair of the group DDI is engaging with modern stats, and so they are both much involved also. So that is so, and this is things we need to follow up on. When it comes to the product development, we need to have a kind of continuous kind of perspective on that, involving also other stakeholders. But it's good to have like campaigns and training something focusing on stats as you all have described. But before we close today, I would like to ask Jared. You had some inputs also, Jared. Would you like to elaborate on any of those before we close?
Thanks, Hilda. Yeah, just a reminder that we have the other annual meeting of the Alliance. That's on the 5th of June at the same time of day. That's the annual meeting of members where the executive board chairs it and reviews the activities of the board. And it's also a forum for member discussion and feedback, especially about the updated strategic plan for the next few years. So we invite you or your colleagues to attend that.
Thank you very much, Jared. And now we are on time. And I will again thank everybody in the TC and all of the working groups for all of the great work that is going on. Many people are doing this not only just on a voluntary basis, and some do it through their work and so on, but many people do a lot on their own free time. And thank you so much to all. It's really great what's going on. And we'll continue to get in touch and follow up with you on the work. And thank you so much for everybody attending. Okay, thank you.